extortion by the taxi associations in the Western Cape.
Now, expectations are high and people are asking and maybe also hoping, where will the allocations this time around go? Tomorrow afternoon, Finance Minister Enoch will deliver his 2023 budget speech detailing how the country's finances will be divided this coming fiscal year. An announcement on Eskom's crippling debt and the electricity crisis is anticipated, but just how much emphasis will be placed on education and early childhood development? Let's welcome social investment specialist Shamiso Chideme. She's from Tshikululu Social Investment. Shamiso, good afternoon. Welcome to Today on eNCA. Thank you very much for your time. I guess the question is not how much should be, how much should? Because, for example, recently the early childhood development has moved from social development to basic education.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good question, because when you go through the president's speech, he was mostly, when it comes to education, he was mostly just focused on, achievements, the 80% matric pass rate, how we've increased the maintenance grants. So it was mostly achievement, right? And, when it comes to ECD, the only thing that was mentioned was that, there would be an increase in the number of ECD centers receiving the subsidy grant. But we're unclear as to, are they going to reduce the compliance for ECD centers to receive these grants? So there was no how is it going to happen. It was just what was going to happen. But we all know that even with, the education speech of, him wanting to integrate vocational education and training into, the school system. So these are all plans. But, what we were quite disappointed with was the fact that, as opposed to, government is only focusing on access and creating opportunities, but instead of actually strengthening the educational system to ensure that we can reduce, youth unemployment, since a large percentage of, the necessary skills required to integrate into the economy are through education. So there was just little talk around early child development, because there are other factors affecting, young children besides access. The quality of early learning in these ECD centers wasn't being addressed. So we don't know that even if an ECD center has access to the subsidy grant, how does that translate in terms of improving the quality of early learning within, not only ECD centers, but within basic education? Yes, an 80% matric pass rate is great, but more needs to be done by government.
Yeah. And more needs to be done at the earlier stage, at the foundation phase, where you're talking about early childhood development. So would you want to see Enoch apportioning or allocating quite a big chunk of money in the education, in the basic education, to early childhood development?
Yes, definitely. We need to see that because, education and unemployment are interlinked, right? You cannot have a budget for unemployment without actually having a substantial budget for education, right? And it all starts at early childhood development. How do we invest in ECD, not only to create access, but to create good quality early learning so that we have a good pipeline of, students that start from ECD all the way into, tertiary education. So that's what we would have wanted to see. That's what we want to see in the budget speech, that how does this translate into the education budget? And if you look at the SONA, we know that a large percentage of the money is going to go towards the energy crisis. So obviously this is going to have ripple effects in the investment in education for government. So we are expecting a decrease in terms of the education budget, because obviously the priority now is towards the energy crisis and towards, unemployment and corruption.
Now, as Tshikululu Social Investments, you guys are working a lot with NGOs plus Corporate South Africa in terms of assisting all kinds of CSI programs and such, and social impact programs. When it comes to education, while we are looking to government, to the budget of government to say, this is how much we want to spend on early childhood development and basic education, in your view, how can the private sector chip in to help the country as far as early childhood development is concerned?
Yes, so whilst government is focused on creating access to, educational opportunities by increasing the number of ECD centers, being registered on DBE database. What social investors can really do is to actually focus on improving the quality of early learning for ECD, for children who are in the ECD space. So we need to improve the stimulation for early learning so that we don't have to play catch up when children go into the basic education system.
Yeah, so the gap would be in the quality. And then come tomorrow, Mr. Gondongwana, by this time, I think he would have finished delivering his budget speech. It's normally about an hour and a half. We understand it's going to start at 2 o'clock. You're going to be zooming in and seeing what he has allocated to education. What would you be excited about, and what would lead to your disappointment? Because your expectation is that there should be some good allocation.
Yes, so what we'll be excited about is the current maintenance grant for early childhood development increasing. So the government didn't talk about that increasing. So we want what he said to then translate to the finance minister's speech in terms of, does this mean an increase in the number of, the maintenance grant, or does this mean that government is just going to be flexible when it comes to, ECD centers being compliant? So what we're waiting for as well to see, what is government going to invest in education, because obviously this is going to affect in the long run where the funding is going and where the gaps are. So I think that's what we're waiting to hear tomorrow. And we're just hoping that, education becomes a key priority along with unemployment, because both of them are interlinked and we cannot separate the two. And we're expecting government to actually step up and invest more in education if they want to address unemployment.
Thank you very much, Shamiso Chideme. She's, of course...
That's 20 gigs anytime data and 20 gigs Night Express. Plus...